Hey everybody, this is a continuation from the electric universe theory discovery that I'm working on right now regarding that the sun is being powered from an external source. That external source being the Orion Nebula Trapezium. And this is based on old alchemical art we find. It's about 500 years old from Athanasius Kircher that you can see there on the upper right. You see that triangle inside the cloud there. That triangle inside the cloud is actually the Orion Nebula Trapezium. And we went through that last time, but right here, just to show you real quick, there was a previous drawing Kircher showed right here where Yahweh was in this huge cloud outside of the solar system. And we see that we have these planets going from the Earth to the Moon to Venus, Mercury, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and we have the fixed stars. Then we have Yahweh here in the middle of these clouds. So we went over to Karlskirch and we found the same. This is this discovery I made a long time ago, showing that Jehovah, the same thing that we see right here, is surrounded by clouds, just like we see right here. But this time we have a triangle, and the clouds that are surrounding it, and the bow shock, it turns out to be the Orion Nebula. So the triangle itself is the trapezium inside the Orion Nebula. So with that, we have this art right here from Athanasius Kircher that shows that this area, which is also Osiris, because Osiris' symbol was an eye inside of a triangle, and it turns out to be the eye of Osiris, and Osiris is related to Orion. But we have some additional information we want to point to this. So this turns out to be the Jehovah, which is what we see in the Bible as capital letters L-O-R-D, and it also is the Tetragrammaton. The reason why it's important to have gathered all that symbolism is because now we can read the descriptions when we read about Jehovah and stuff like that in the Bible. It's all going to start falling together. Let's take a look at some of the characteristics that we discovered. One of the things I showed you last time was he speaks to the sun and does not shine. He seals off the light of the stars. And that shows that this area in the Orion Nebula is actually controlling the power source to the sun. Lord in capital letters in the Bible means Jehovah. Now, interestingly, they always talk about a whirlwind or a pillar, which I think is really interesting, but we won't go into that this time. Here's another interesting characteristic. He made all the stars, the Bear and Orion, the Pleiades, and the constellations of the southern sky. Well, the Orion Nebula makes stars. It's more than likely the candidate for the Orion constellation, regardless of what NASA says that the Orion Nebula is only 2 million years old, because I don't buy it if all of the other stars are, they say, are older than that, because it shows easily that the Orion Nebula was what created those stars. We also have the Pleiades, which is really close to it as well. All of the stars would be within the range of the Orion Nebula that would make sense. And so we have this area also creating stars. It's the closest star nebula to us that creates stars. So this is just another confirmation that what we're seeing right here. He speaks to the sun, does not shine, so he's controlling the power, and he also made the stars, which is the Orion Nebula as well. We also see another area in the Bible where it says, "Seek him who made the Pleiades and the Orion and the constellations of the southern sky," or what have you. And so we can see that this area is referring to that. Now here's another one I found from Ezekiel. "And when I put thee out, I will cover the heaven and make the stars thereof dark. I will cover the sun with a cloud, and the moon shall not give her light." So this is more indication that it's controlling the power of the stars and the sun. So let's listen to this real quick, and then I'm going to show you some new stuff. I want to show you some symbolism that I found that ties all into this, and I don't know how these people knew this symbolism so long ago, but it's very clear once we know what we're dealing with that this was the case.
Evidence suggests that the corona is not rotating the same way as the photosphere, or in the same way. It rotates in the same direction, but not in the same manner. This graph from Giordano, 2008, shows the measurements of the rotation period plotted against latitude. and the parabolic curve shows the differential rotation of the photosphere for comparison. And the puzzling aspect is that the corona does not show differential rotation. Also, the corona has a faster rotation, that is a smaller period, than the photosphere at higher latitudes. So that says to me that the photosphere can't be driving the corona. It seems that it's the corona that's linked to the Alfvén's Faraday motor. But Alfvén's mechanism can work both ways, and therefore it's possible that the corona can be driven by the heliospheric current sheet. But if so, where could the heliospheric current sheet motion come from? The recent evidence from the IBEX mission suggests that the heliosphere sits in the centre of a galactic Birkeland current. And it seems reasonable to assume that the presence of the heliosphere affects the Birkeland current, which either bulges around it, as NASA says, shown on the left, or perhaps pinches down onto it, as we might prefer. Now we know that a Birkeland current has a radially varying helicity, which allows each particle to follow the magnetic field line at its own location. The balance is maintained automatically because if I is not parallel to B at any location, the cross product will generate a radial force which moves the plasma back into alignment.
Okay, so the purpose of that really was to show you that apparently our heliosphere is sitting in the center of a galactic Birkeland current. And so this is another indication that, yeah, our sun is being powered from an external source. So this is when I started digging into some of the esoteric information and the symbolism surrounding all of it. And here's what I found out that's really interesting. I think I know now why these ancients always were associating everything to man himself. Because there is an interesting symbolism that exists in the cosmos surrounding what you're seeing right here with the Birkeland current, to what you see in the solar system, and what you see actually in the cosmos itself, that somehow relates it to man. And these ancients knew about it a long time ago. This central sun, which is what the Kabbalists and what the Jews called Jehovah, it is not our sun. The central sun, which is also, you probably have heard called the black sun before, but the black sun is really not a good word for it, because people associate that with something that's bad or whatever. But the central sun is actually the sun, the central invisible sun, which is interesting, which is what they call it. And for you guys that study the electric universe theory, I'd be very interested to knowing what phenomena out there would be considered invisible, because they always refer to it as the invisible central sun. So for whatever reason, this particular sun is invisible. This is what all of the esoteric stuff is telling us. Now I have some interesting text that I pulled out of some of this esoteric stuff I want to read for you real quick, and then I want to show you some symbolism around some of this ancient stuff, and we're going to relate it to Fohat. And if you remember, Fohat is the universal electric entity that's being referred to esoterically. It's what's actually the force, or this electricity that actually powers the sun. And we're going to see how all this ties to man here in just a little bit. But right here it says, outside the boundaries of the solar system, it is other suns, and especially the mysterious central sun, the abode of the invisible deity. So there's that word invisible. So if there's any of you guys out there that know why it would be invisible, I see this all over the place. So it's across culture, and all of these ancients, they called it invisible. And this area that they're referring to is they're referring to the center of the trapezium. And that eye that sits in the center of the trapezium, that eye is some kind of a vortex. And that vortex that they're referring to is associated with this invisible central sun. So that's some clues for you to go and look up what that might be. So the Kabbalists, they speak of their central sun right here. And interestingly, it says that the channels through which the influence of these bodies was conveyed to the earth was held to be electrical, so the Kabbalists believed that this stuff was electrical as well. Now this is interesting here, and this is from Isis Unveiled. As we will show in subsequent chapters, the sun was not considered by the ancients the direct cause of the light, so there we go again, but as an agent of the former, through which the light passes on its way to our sphere. So the light, once again, so this electricity is coming from the central sun, the Orion Nebula, and our sun is not the source of it, it is. And the Egyptians called it the Eye of Osiris, which I've already shown you the symbolism for already, which is the eye inside the triangle, and that refers to the trapezium of the Orion Nebula. And it says, the light made manifest to the world, which is the mind and divine intellect of the concealed. There's that concealed again. So it's referring to it as being some kind of an invisible phenomena. And then finally here at the bottom we see that for the Jewish and the Kabbalists here, IAO is a sun god and the Jewish Jehovah, the intellectual or central sun. So there's our connection directly right there. So we can see that the Orion Nebula trapezium is, that since we've already determined that, and we've already looked at that and matched up the symbolism, it is the invisible central sun, and it represents the Godhead, which is also in this as well. You'll see why the Godhead makes sense too when we take a look at this related to man. So now I want to get into the symbolism regarding all of this stuff, and I want to show you something interesting about Fohat. Remember, Fohat is the electric entity, the universal electric entity. Okay, so this is where we start getting into the symbolism. So if you see up here it says Fohat, the cosmic electricity right here. And as I scrolled down this and I began to read this stuff, I noticed that there was a very important thing I saw regarding Fohat, and it was this right here. Although Tibetan term Fohat is used by the masters and H.P. Blavatsky, nevertheless, Fohat is nothing other than Kundalini. Helena Blavatsky says of Fohat that the ancients represented it by a serpent, for Fohat hisses as he glides hither and thither. And by what illustrative symbol has Kundalini always been represented? A serpent. Well, this is really interesting because now I want to show you some more alchemical art from Athanasius Kircher that kind of proves this. And this begins to take a look at the way they were comparing man himself to the cosmos. Now, if you take a look at this particular diagram right here, this looks a lot like what we call the tree of life. And right down here you have the root. The root was always associated to earth. This represents, as we know now, it represents the central sun, the central invisible sun. And as you can see, this represents the head. And in the center of this, we would have our sun. Okay, so this is kind of like the tree of life that we would see. And so now he has another piece of art. And I want you to take a look, because we now have our Kundalini right here. But now we have planets associated to him right here. And down there we have the Earth and we have the Moon. So we have Mercury, Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. We have the fixed stars, and then guess what up here? We have the central invisible sun, and that's what we see right here. So when we take a look at the Kabbalistic tree of life, we see the same basic thing as well. Let me show you a picture of that. If you remember, I did this a long time ago. Well, not that long ago, but it's showing the same thing. This right up here is derived, this pyramid that you see up here, this represents universal mind, and it represents the area of the brain. This right here represents the sun, so we have the same thing. We have the Earth, Moon, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, which probably could be here or here, I guess. We have this trinity here, and we have the fixed stars, and then we have the central sun. Now I want you to notice that the central sun has a direct path to the sun and then down to Earth, so we kind of see the same thing going on where this talks to the sun talks to the Earth, and it actually reflects off the moon too, which is what we also see in the alchemical art. Now if we put the human body on top of this, we'll see what we're talking about here. Now the symbolism for this pyramid that we see right here, this was derived from St. Joseph Cathedral. You can see the air shafts inside the pyramid, and the slopes match the angles of the pyramid. And so this is where the head goes right here. You take a look at the tree of life now, you see where the sun, our sun is located. Our sun is located with the heart, in the heart area. And this central invisible sun is located in the brain area. Okay, so that's really important to remember, because now I'm going to read to you some stuff that I found in some esoteric stuff. And this is all going to come together when I show you the symbolism cosmically. Now I've shown this stuff before, but I didn't find this text until just recently. It says the sun is the heart of the solar world system, and its brain is hidden behind the visible sun. From thence sensation is radiated into every nerve of the great body, and the waves of life essence flow into each artery and vein. The planets are the limbs and its pulses. So I found the same thing here. Occult philosophy defines the visible sun simply as a glowing sphere, the real sun being hidden behind, and that's referring to the one that refers to the brain. The invisible sun is the storehouse of our little cosmos, self-generating its vital fluid, and ever receiving as much as it gives out. From thence sensation is radiated into every nerve center of the great body, and the waves of the life essence flow into each artery and vein. The planets are its limbs and pulses. There is a regular circulation of the vital fluid throughout our system, of which the sun is the heart. So the sun, our heart, the heart of our solar system, gets powered by the invisible central sun, which is the brain. The same as the circulation of the blood. So this is really interesting. So let me show you why this is very interesting. This is why it's really interesting. Because this is Michelangelo's creation of Adam. And this is the image of a brain. And we know this because we can take a look at this thing and see that God's arm that comes across is the corpus callosum. This fold that you see right on top of his this thinner looking fold that you see on top of his clothes right here, that is the fornix, and this fold that you see right here, this is the midbrain, but this is the brain, what you see right here. And so what he actually painted was, he actually painted the Orion Nebula, and it's an overlay, and it's in very high detail, as you can see right here. Now we know this is a brain because then we take this and we can see how the cosmos is showing us. It's showing us the symbolism of man. And so the Orion Nebula that we see right here is actually the image of a brain, which is I found out. Now remember, I discovered this a long time ago, and now it's turning out that this is the way these things are. The triangle, which as you see is the trapezium of the Orion Nebula, when we look at it as a brain, interestingly, it turns out to be the area where the pineal gland is located inside the brain. And this area is, if we take a look at the Orion Nebula, the Birkeland currents, and our sun, or our sun's heliosphere, sits in the center of a galactic Birkeland current, which is coming from the Orion Nebula trapezium, which is a brain, which is the invisible central sun that is powering our sun. This is what the esoteric stuff is telling us. So I've got a couple of interesting diagrams that I created, because remember, Fohat is the same as Kundalini. So I happened to go out there and find a diagram of Kundalini, and let me show you something really interesting. This is the diagram that I found regarding Kundalini on the internet, and you can see the flow of the Kundalini as it goes up the spine. Does it look familiar to you? Does it look like anything that you're familiar with in the electric universe theory? Well, I've got a diagram to show you here. And here is your Birkeland current right here. And I want you to notice the similarities between what we see right here and what we see right here. I don't think it's a coincidence that this Kundalini follows the same path as what we see with a Birkeland current right here. And as it gets up into the head, it passes right through the area of the pineal gland and then moves up through the top of the head. The same twisting motion is happening here. It moves up through the brain, and this line that you see right here, this line passes right through that area which is associated with the pineal gland, which is the brain, which is the brain in the Orion Nebula. This is the pineal gland area, and that's exactly where that's passing through, just like we see in Kundalini, matching the current. So you can see how these ancients knew this. I have no idea. And then here's a copy of what we see right here. Now, there's another piece of symbolism I've shown you before as well, and it's regarding the winged disc. And if you're familiar with the staff of Hermes, which is what we see right here, a lot of times what you see in this is you will see the chakras. You see how this person is right here on this particular diagram that you see right here, and the wings on his head. Well, this is exactly what we see in the Assyrian, or the where they show the tree of life and the winged disc sitting on top of it. And we see Hermes, he's got the wings on his head right here holding a staff. Okay, so we have the same kind of information right here. This is the tree of life that you see right here. You see the pine cones that they're holding up to this. You see Hermes and you see the tree of life. The tree of life that they're showing you on this diagram back here, and you see where the staff is. That staff that he's holding right there is located right where our sun is, and that's the heart of the solar system. We come up to the very top, and then we have the winged disc, which is in the head, which is in the brain area. And all of this has been looked at as far as geometry before. This is the infrared version of the Orion Nebula, and there's your winged disc that I found a long time ago. And the geometry matches what we see on top of this tree of life. And the pine cones represent the pineal gland. Now, the line that you see pointing from this winged disc to this area right here, this is the image that we see. So we actually see Kundalini coming up and ending in a winged disc right here, which is what we see, and it's what we see in these diagrams. So cosmically, what we're seeing is we're actually seeing the Earth, which is root, and then we have our sun here. Once we leave the solar system right here, this area up here represents the brain, which is spoken of, and which is the, if this is Earth and this is our visible sun, remember it is the central invisible sun behind our sun. So if this is Earth, behind our sun is the central invisible sun, which represents the brain. All of this all matches up. The symbolism matches up. Amazingly, all of the symbolism that we even see cosmically matches up to what we see in these diagrams, matches up to what we see or what we read in these texts. It all matches up. So I'm almost 100% sure that this area is what is powering the sun, as described in the text that we just read. So if we take a look at this again, the true sun is at the heart of the solar system, and its brain is hidden behind the visible sun. Occult philosophy defines the visible sun as simply a glowing sphere, the real sun being hidden behind. The invisible sun is the storehouse of our little cosmos, self-generating its vital fluid and ever receiving as much of it gives out. From thence sensation is radiated into every nerve center of the great body. The great body, so it basically powers the solar system, or it powers the sun, and our sun powers the body. Very, very interesting. And also extremely similar a similar structure that we would see when we take a look at man. And the whole idea of Fohat being the cosmic electricity and being related to Birkeland currents, and Birkeland currents looking like Kundalini and all this other stuff that we see. I thought you guys might be interested in seeing that. So we have this information from that we can actually see, and we know that Michelangelo, as I showed you, we can look at the details, but this creation of Adam, he painted the Orion Nebula, and the Orion Nebula's brain, and now we know why. It's the brain that powers our sun, which is the body of the solar system, which is the heart. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Y'all take care. Talk to you soon.